Hello, friends. Welcome to the Wake Up with Gratitude podcast. I'm your host, Julie Boyer, and we're doing a very special event for the month of November. Every day, I'm sharing with you a different way to practice gratitude, as November is traditionally known as the month of gratitude. As we spend these last 10 days together, I encourage you to look back on what you've learned about gratitude this month and ask yourself, which of these gratitude practices do I want to incorporate into my life going forward? I do have a favor to ask. If you've been following along over the past few weeks and have gained something from these episodes, would you take a quick moment and give the show a rating? You can give the podcast a 5-star rating through the Apple Podcast app on your iPhone. Or if you're using Spotify, all you have to do is click right on the front screen of the podcast and give it a rating there as well. Thanks so much for taking time to rate the podcast. Now let's start today's gratitude episode. On day 22, we're going to talk about all the ways we can be grateful for transportation. Many of you might find yourself traveling today, especially if you're heading home for the Thanksgiving holiday or visiting with friends or family that don't live in your area. It can be a very stressful time to travel, so we're going to focus on how we can stay grateful even when we're traveling in difficult and busy times. So let's talk about how we can use gratitude to help us when we're driving. If you've ever been on a road trip, you know that being grateful is one of the last things that you're thinking about. You're probably wondering how long it's going to take, will the weather hold up, what are the road conditions going to be like? Gratitude can help us to shift our energy as we are driving long distances and in challenging weather. We can express gratitude for the vehicle itself. Having a vehicle that we can drive is a gift. We are at a time in history when new vehicle production is hampered by supply chain issues and raw material challenges. In fact, our lease is up on our vehicle in a few months, and we thought that in 5 years we'd be able to upgrade to a new vehicle, but it turns out we are very happy to keep the hybrid vehicle that we have. Even getting a rental car can be a challenge. So thinking about gratitude for the vehicle, gratitude that you have a destination to go to, gratitude for the people you may be sharing the vehicle with, and you can even do a fun gratitude game with the people that you're traveling with. I call it the gratitude alphabet. Starting with the letter A, say something that you're grateful for and why, and the next person goes, and on and on and on. When you're traveling by public transportation, one of the most challenging things is that you are not in charge of the schedule. And that can be incredibly frustrating when you're trying to get home for the holidays or to an event on time, or in your everyday life, simply getting back and forth to work. Instead of getting frustrated at something that is completely out of your control, take a few deep breaths and remember that having public transportation at all is something to be grateful for. There are many places that don't have access to affordable public transportation or that have routes that even go to where people live. I live on an island and we have a service called BC Ferries that allows us to get back and forth from the mainland. Often these ferries are canceled due to staffing shortages or bad weather, and it can be extremely frustrating when you're trying to get somewhere by the ferry. I remember, though, that it's a gift that I get to live on this island, and I'm thankful for the fact that I've got BC Ferries that can allow me to go back and forth when I choose to. Maybe not always on my own schedule, but I make the best of it when I do get to ride the ferries. Sometimes I believe that having a good, positive attitude about public transportation and not getting flustered or frustrated helps the journey go a lot more smoothly. The last mode of transportation I want to mention is for those that are flying over the next couple of days or perhaps later in the holiday season. I remember when flying changed for good after 9/11. We never used to have to take off our shoes when going through security, and that action as well as other things have made airport travel a lot more slow than it used to be. Add in a global pandemic, and air travel has become much more complicated than it ever has been before. Bringing your gratitude practices with you to the airport is a great idea, as well as planning ahead for delays and unexpected challenges that might arise. That will help your trip go a lot more smoothly. I also want to recommend that you do your best to treat all staff and personnel that you interact with kindness and gratitude. If a flight is canceled, if things are delayed, taking our anger and frustration out on the gate agents doesn't help anybody. When we focus on being kind first and expressing gratitude, that can help our trip to end up being much more smoothly than we had ever imagined. I've experienced my fair share of delays and cancellations, and I find that focusing on what I'm grateful for and what's working is a lot easier than focusing on what's not going well. So where are you traveling to this week? Are you headed on a bus, a train, a plane, or traveling by car? Which of these gratitude practices will help you along your travels? I'll be back tomorrow with more Thanksgiving week gratitude practices for you and your family. This concludes today's gratitude practice. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you take a moment to implement something you've learned today. I have a favor to ask. Would you mind rating and reviewing this podcast? It doesn't matter which podcast app you're using. Every rating helps other people to find this podcast and help them make their decision when choosing which podcast to listen to. I appreciate your support, friends, and I'm excited. I appreciate your support, friends, and thanks so much for taking the time to listen and rating the podcast. I'll be back tomorrow with another way to practice gratitude.